Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cindy, John, thank you very much. Just want to say that when I first got elected, I thrilled at the opportunity of having town hall meetings in various parts of my ward. I guess it wasn't called, if you will, community engagement back then, but it was a form of inviting citizens to come out in case there were issues within the particular neighborhood, and or if there was a particular project, Mr. Chairman, that council was prepared to support pending citizen feedback. I loved hosting various types of town hall meetings in specific areas of the ward, and from those town hall meetings, most importantly, John and Cindy, was encouraging and asking near the end of the meeting for those that would like to volunteer, form a citizens committee, work in what I call a tri-party relationship between city staff, my office, and the citizens of the neighborhood that would be the leaders and form the committee and work towards whatever the task force, whatever the project, whatever the program or issue was that would benefit overall that particular area. So the pieces and parts of, if you will, the East Mountain and the dozen or so actual neighborhoods made the overall East Mountain community, I felt, even stronger. And so forgive me for just saying a little bit of self-aggrandizement there, but I just want to say for the record that the recent participation and the recent excitement over community engagement over the last 5 to 10 years, where it's been more officially pronounced through the neighborhood action strategy in that department that Paul Johnson, if you will, officially launched about 5-6 years ago, and now has been led by Suzanne Brown. It's all part and parcel of the evolution of having more of our citizens engaged in the process and in the ultimate decision making that occurs at City Hall. And I've always welcomed it. Not everyone's going to be in agreement. There's been times when there's been disagreement, but at the end of the day, if consensus is always the ideal preferred scenario. But Mr. Chairman, I just say all that to say, obviously, I support the continued thrust of what you're doing, and obviously with more staff involved that are now reaching out, the outreach is even greater across the city than maybe it was where it was piecemealed, if you will, in the past, depending on if that particular ward or area of the city had some kind of initiative that some of the leaders wanted to pursue. One of my bugbears, Mr. Chairman, between myself, you, and Councillor Green, I read here on page of the community suggestion actions of 2017 under community partnerships, number 9, strengthening youth engagement and decision making through the establishment of youth committees. So forgive me, John, ad nauseum, this won't be news to you, but at the beginning of this term I said, okay, if you want to abolish the Hamilton Youth Advisory Committee, which Councillor Marula started 10 years ago and very cleverly handed off to me in spite of the workload that we both had on our plates in our offices, I was happy to do it. And as we know, it has some upsides, downsides to it. A lot of transient with the students from high school, university. Attendance was difficult, but I thought overall for those that participated, 1 or 2 I believe ran for public office, it was a great thing to put on their resume and give them first experience at municipal government potentially. So where does all this youth engagement and youth committees and all that structure and status stand? Mr. Chairman, through you to whoever wants to take a stab at that, please.
And by the way, there is such a word as bugbear. So, John.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll pass that on to Chris Herstek.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Jackson. Yes, we do have a draft report coming back to committee in September. We'd be more than glad to come over and give you an update in the near future on that youth engagement strategy.
Okay, Chris, well, that's encouraging. So I guess in collaboration with neighborhood action strategies and whatever other departments, members of council, community groups, and obviously most importantly the youth, you're saying that you possibly have a new plan to unfold come the fall at this committee level, Mr. Chairman, through you to Chris?
Through the chair, yes, we are going to come back with a strategy for that.
Okay, terrific. I'll eagerly look forward to that. Thank you, John and Cindy. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Before I go on to second-time speakers, just on that point, I'd like to give the chair over to Councillor Scally. Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair. Now, with respect to that youth component, there were 2 attempts. The first was about a decade ago to formally establish that liaison with youth locally. Noticing that we weren't truly grasping, I guess, a great deal of excitement surrounding the initiative. I brought forward another initiative with respect to using social media as a means of trying to bring on youth and engage them accordingly. Somehow that's been lost and it's gone, I don't know where that ended up. Can someone just, through you, Madam Chair, explain to me what happened with that resolution of council?
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with that, but we could add that into our upcoming report to provide further consultation and or address that.
Okay, because I think, as Councillor Jackson referred to, attendance was becoming, we couldn't get quorum, so obviously that's problematic. But with means of communicating through conferencing, video conferencing and so on, we felt at that time with the council resolution that that was worth a stab at. And still something that I believe even more so today than when I originally brought it forward, that potentially there is some excitement along those lines. So when we could get an update accordingly, that would be greatly appreciated.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll investigate that, bring that back, and we'll set up a meeting as well with yourself to delve into it a little bit further. Thank
you, sir. And I'll take back the chair, and we have Councillor Green for a second time.
I appreciate the indulgence. A couple of things came to mind from some very apt questions. On the youth file, I would be remiss if I didn't just acknowledge Jesse Williamson's ongoing work informally throughout the community on the youth file. I'd love to see that formalized in some way and perhaps given some direction and some lead to just go ahead and be all systems go on that, because he's already doing great work, at least I can say, to my neighborhood and across some of our inner cities. But I think strategically it would probably be, it would make sense if we actually had not off of somebody's desk, but had a defined role where that was what they were taking on. Mr. Chair, we've heard now about community outreach. We know that Councillor Jackson has actually been doing asset-based community development and neighborhood action strategies for decades before we even formalized it. But I'm actually equally, if not more, interested in how we're going to embed this in the culture of our corporation. So in here, there's lots of next steps for outreach. I talked about, from an administrative standpoint, having it be in reports, but Councillor Partridge was quite right when she identified that the siloed approach, we can do it from this committee, but if this is not bought into and sold across the corporation from every standpoint, from every division that we have, it's empty and meaningless. So the question is, we're doing outreach out into the community. What's happening internal to the corporation that's going to take these points that Councillor Partridge brought out in a very practical example with planning and with subdivisions and new developments, but everything? How are we getting this outreach into our workforce?
Vicki?
So through the chair, some really good questions. So our Future Hamilton really focused on the community and their voice. And then based on that excellent input, it formed the direction of the 6 strategic plans for the corporation. So that's where there is alignment. So now a lot more work has been done. And that community group is evolving and growing, and now is established over 200 suggested actions. So what we're doing now is regrouping through the CMO office to start rolling out, okay, what does this mean? We are absolutely committed to bring these 2 components together. So we're looking at, as Suzanne said, we're launching a sort of community engagement toolkit for employees that they could use out in the neighborhoods. But it is now putting these 2 pieces together. Learn from what the community said. They are literally taking these same 6 strategic directions that we have and embedding them in their communities. And so then now when we drill down to the specifics, how is that going to work? So each one of the GMs has a lead role in one of those strategic directions. Yep. And so we would be responsible then. I'm responsible for culture and diversity, for example. So I need to understand what's happening within the various corporation as well as out in the community. So we will be coming back with the framework. We absolutely want to integrate these things together and make sure that it resonates. And when it gets to some of those difficult challenges that will occur from time to time, we need to know those scenarios and work them through. So
that's helpful. That's very helpful, Mr. Chair. So as the director here in this department, you've been given latitude for diversity and culture across all departments to have feedback and influence and kind of, that's good to hear. I certainly look forward to the framework because, again, you know, to Councillor Partridge's point, you know, seeing the siloed approach and just knowing this is a culture conversation that we're having here, a way of doing business, a way of engagement, a way of respecting asset-based, like community-led initiatives, which are happening informally, politically, and otherwise through our wards. But I'd like to see it kind of seep into the culture of the corporation so that it just becomes who we are as a process and as a corporation. So great stuff. I'm satisfied by that. Thank you for indulging me with the extra time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Green. We have no further speakers, so John, Cindy, many thanks for your presentation. So a motion to receive the presentation moved by Green, second by Skelly. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. Moving on.